Morgan Pehme, editor-in-chief of City and State, and this is Last Look. Today, our guest is City and State columnist Bruce Gyory. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Your most recent column is about not taking for granted when you're running for office the concerns of the electorate. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, basically, candidates have this bad tendency, not just in New York, everywhere, of governing as if in campaigning based on what they want, why they want voters to vote for them, rather than why voters are. And what I suggested is, when you govern, address the issues voters want addressed, not your own wish list, if you want to get reelected. And what I was trying to do was find a common thread between what looked like very disparate results around the nation in 2013. A Democrat winning a race that most thought a Republican should win for governor of Virginia. A Republican in Chris Christie streaking to a landslide in a normally blue state. And when Republicans win, normally they win by a narrow margin, not by a landslide. Bill de Blasio winning a blowout 3-1 victory here in New York, winning almost all demographic groups. And then the Republicans just winning landslides, re-elections for county executive in Nassau and Westchester, and those look like very disparate results. So how do you, and what I came to was the common denominator in each was the winning candidates were listening to what voters really wanted. In Virginia, the Republicans shifted from a primary system to a convention system, and they came up with a very strident, conservative, far-out ticket, of which the gubernatorial candidate was probably the most reasoned and reasonable, but he tripped up on issues like transportation, so critical to Northern Virginia. He was an advocate of that mandatory vaginal ultrasound bill, and gay marriage, none of which were popular in the growing region of Virginia, which is the Northern Virginia suburbs, or the suburbs of Washington, D.C. So he lost narrowly. In New Jersey, Christie transcended politics because he or partisanship, because he put it aside in the response to Sandy, and he not only consolidated the Republican base, but he carried Hispanics and he carried women. Wow. Then de Blasio, who everybody thought, oh my God, he'll divide the city, yeah, he might win the primary. His attack on the affordability gap, his tax policies, united middle class and poor New Yorkers, and while he ran away with the vote of the minority majority, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, which cast 55% of the overall New York City vote, and he won by just complete landslide margins, he did very well. He was the first Democrat to carry the white vote since Koch in 1985. And then you say, okay, well, it's a Democratic year in New York. Well, no, because the Republicans had that property tax issue going for them. The incumbents said in Nassau and Westchester, we held the line. That's a bit of an ouch for me because I was working for Tom Suozzi, full disclosure. But when the Republicans can grab that property tax issue credibly in the suburbs, that elephant can still stampede. So those are the kind of, in all cases, the common denominator was they listened to what voters wanted. Property tax is key in the suburbs, the affordability gap key in New York City. Respectively, Mangano and Astorino targeted that well, as did de Blasio.
That was kind of a striking through line for me that you drew, because it seems that politicians across the country and locally are making more of their, at least, campaign decisions predicated upon polling, right?
Yes.
That you say, oh, these are the issues I'm going to focus on because they test well. Is that what the losers in this case didn't do? Did they not really see what the people were responding to?
You're right. It's not like nobody polls, and there's an aspect of that. But it's more than that. Sometimes what polls can't tell you is the salience or velocity factor of an issue. If you looked at the early polling data in the New York City mayoral race, it was neither easy nor obvious that de Blasio's attack on Bloomberg would play that well in a Democratic primary. The reaction to Bloomberg in the early polling data, public as well as private, was they respect Bloomberg, they're ready for a change. You would not have instantly gleaned that that they wanted that clear demarcation line. I think one of the things that happened is Bloomberg's unwillingness, along with Kelly, to show any compromise on stop and frisk, to build any bridges to teachers on education and to parents, rendered him increasingly isolated, where he wasn't there in February of 2013, but by August and September he was in a different place.
So it's not just about being reactive to polling, but kind of being predictive as to where the polling is going to move.
And having that good gut sense of how an issue is going to move forward, how it's going to play. And the other thing is, voters don't want an authenticity gap to come in. They don't want somebody to come across poll tested, like I'm going to move my left hand now because that's what they want, and I'm going to move my right hand here because that's what they want. They want to know, how do I actually interact? And to take it away from the frivolous, they want to see your sincerity on issues. And I think the other thing is, each of these candidates brought a certain sincerity on issues. De Blasio, agree with him or disagree with him, he brought sincerity. Chris Christie, agree with him or disagree with him, what you're getting is what he's feeling, and so that works. So if you're just poll driven, you can make mistakes. You have to develop. You can't allow an authenticity gap to creep in. Mitt Romney's a great example. The other side, there was an authenticity gulch, not a gap.
One of the big stories this month was the release of the preliminary report of the Moreland Commission.
Yes.
What was your take on that report?
I was underwhelmed till I read it. I thought it was actually a pretty good report. I think one of the challenges is the commission itself. The report was solid. It laid out with crystalline clarity why the Board of Elections is geared not to do well in investigations. It laid out with great precision how certain legislators are double dipping, by which the commission says they're using their campaign accounts to pay for basically personal living expenses and living a little bit high on the hog. Not all, but some. And then some of them are even getting reimbursement as if they incurred those expenses themselves when they didn't. That could be a legal problem for whoever did it. It doesn't allege names, but they were very clear on that. They were clear about why we need more disclosure in terms of campaign finance, and the report had a very erudite debate between public financing and the minority report, which was against public financing but for disclosure, and all that was good. I think what the commission needs to do, the commissioners need to play that role that Samuel Seabury played in the Jimmy Walker investigation, and find a way of explaining, as Seabury did, that little tin cup, which was, everybody knew when he exposed a little tin cup how much that they're actually putting the proceeds of the bribes into a little tin cup in the 1920s and early 1930s. And I think the commissioners themselves should come out from behind their prosecutorial tendency to hold all the cards close to the vest and start using hearings to bring to the public's attention what's going on. And then that could create some wind in the sails for hopefully both the governor and the legislature to come up with a real reform package. Because remember, a Moreland Act commission, by definition, is not a prosecutorial instrument. It is designed to have prosecutorial powers in order to come up with legislative remedies. That's often misinterpreted by the media, in no offense to you, but also by the fact that Cuomo put so many prosecutors on. If he had perhaps had a more balanced a group of commissioners who had a broader experience base, they may not have this problem now.
It's interesting what you're saying about the kind of lack of evocative images that really connect with the public. I was kind of surprised by how underwhelming the response was to the report.
Yes.
And I wonder if that is a function of the fact that perhaps all the parties involved now don't want the report to go too much farther. I mean, it seems like the legislature is really antagonistic against the Moreland Commission. And the governor, I was really struck by when he called into Brian Lehrer the other day, and Brian was asking about it. He said, you know, everyone knows this problem of money in politics. It's like, this was supposed to be your bombshell, right? Yeah. And now we're dialing it back. And so is there a lack of political will to realize the full potential of the commission?
That's a very fair question, and I don't know the answer to that. I think,
I'm just trying to get you in trouble, Bruce.
I recognize it. But I think in this sense, for good things to happen, the legislature needs to feel this is less of an attack as an opportunity for them to put the corruption scandals that have admittedly touched a very small minority, but far too much corruption to be tolerated. I think we ought to have a zero tolerance posture towards corruption, but to get it behind it so that they're reforming themselves, and clearly the governor, having put this political capital into the Moreland Commission, can't appear to be walking away from it. I think part of the subdued reaction is the expectation was going to be like it was going to be Watergate-like hearings, and people are going to be hauled off in handcuffs, and I don't think that was ever, that would not have been what you would use a Moreland Commission for. That's what you would appoint a special attorney general for, or open the books up to Preet Bharara to look at. A Moreland Commission, again, by definition, is designed to come up with a legislative remedy to an investigatory problem. But all the questions you asked are very pertinent, and they're going to have to answer them.
Amid the 24/7 news cycle, I feel like the media oftentimes gets caught up in just focusing on whatever's the shiniest object, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of important stories get lost in the mix. For you, in 2013, what were some of the stories that didn't get enough attention or maybe have gotten forgotten amid the tumult of it all?
Yep, I'll cite three that I think will jump to the fore in 2014. One is the problem upstate school districts are having in light of even though they didn't get cuts this last year in prior cuts, upstate school districts are really hurting, particularly smaller upstate school districts in small towns and rural areas. I think that's going to be a big issue. Usually we think of school aid as a fight pitting the suburban interests versus New York City, the CFE lawsuit. I think this year upstate school districts are going to be a key, right there front and center as to how and whether that gets resolved. I think the DREAM Act for immigrant students that got short shrift, surprisingly, in the last budget negotiations. Hispanic legislators were literally seething at the fact that it did not get more attention. I can see that issue coming to the fore. And then if the Supreme Court decides against the contraception coverage compromise that Obama put through, I think that could really outrage women voters, particularly in New York. In the last two election cycles, women have voted 2-1 for the Democrats against the Republicans, for Cuomo against Palladino, for Obama against Romney here in this state. And if they get the feeling this Supreme Court is going to try to take away or deny, or basically say your employer's views on what should be done on contraception supersede the employees in a health care decision, I could see there being a real backlash amongst women voters, and therefore that codification of Roe v. Wade, which the Senate didn't seem to want to do, could come front and center. And if it's not handled in the legislative session, it could become a huge issue in the election for who's going to return in 2015 to the Senate. So those are three issues I think may come bobbing back to the top.
Bruce Gyory, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for this episode of Last Look. For more episodes, please join us on the web at cityandstateny.com.